Africa is unarguably one of the cradles of civilization. The continent was home to the great pharaohs of Egypt, the great Hannibal Barca of Carthage, now known as Tunisia, the biblical Queen Sheba from Ethiopia, the magnificent Mansa Musa of Mali, the enigmatic and mysterious Queen Cleopatra of Egypt, who, with her stunning looks and almost magical personality, seduced and used two of the greatest men in history, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony of Rome, for her own personal interests. Africa was also home to countless other great and famous men and women during the ancient and medieval eras. Yet, some Western historians dubbed Africa the Dark Continent, and still argue even to this day that Africa had no powerful ancient and medieval kingdoms and history. But out of the so-called Dark Continent, some great and powerful ancient and medieval kingdoms rose and fell. Kingdoms that were as powerful and influential as their European and Asian counterparts in those eras. Hence, in this captivating video, we are going to explore those powerful ancient and medieval African kingdoms whose well-documented histories still survive today. And of course, we will start with the most ancient known African kingdom, the widely regarded cradle of civilization itself, the mighty Egypt. Talking about ancient African kingdoms, or the very cradle of human civilization in general, without mentioning ancient Egypt, can be rightly said to be a scholarly crime. It is akin to talking about Christianity without mentioning Jesus Christ. Egypt was even already a well-developed civilization during the biblical era. The Egyptian kingdom flourished along the banks of the fertile River Nile for thousands of years. The major eras of the Kingdom of Egypt are often divided into three major periods: the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. The Old Egyptian Kingdom, 2686 BCE, 2181 BCE. This period of the ancient Egyptian kingdom is notable for the construction of astonishing pyramids, including the Great Pyramid of Giza. During this era, pharaohs, kings, believed to be divine, held immense power. The ancient Egyptians also developed outstanding hieroglyphic writing and effective administrative systems during this era. The Middle Egyptian Kingdom, 2055 BCE, 1650 BCE. This era was characterized by stability and immense cultural achievements. During the era, the ancient Egyptians also expanded trade into Nubia and the Levant. This period also witnessed the development of Egyptian literature and art, including the famous story, The Tale of Songhai. The Egyptian New Kingdom, 1550 BCE, 1070 BCE. This period was marked by imperial expansion and military conquests. This period also witnessed the rule of famous pharaohs including Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, and Ramses II. The independence of ancient Egypt ended abruptly in 525 BCE, when it was conquered by Persia and incorporated into the Achaemenid Persian Empire. In 332 BCE, Egypt was incorporated into the Macedonian Empire after Alexander the Great conquered the entirety of ancient Persia. During this period, the capital of Egypt was moved to the city of Alexandria. Egypt became a Roman province after the defeat of Mark Antony and Queen Cleopatra VII in 30 BCE. The Egyptians made significant contributions to mathematics, medicine, architecture, and art. The hieroglyphic writing system and the efficient process of mummification are also their well-known work. The ancient Egyptians also developed a very effective irrigation system that is still widely practiced today. Another ancient but not well-documented African kingdom that survived even longer than the mighty Egypt was the Christian kingdom of Abyssinia, modernly known as Ethiopia, whose powerful and semi-godlike rulers claimed direct descent from King Solomon of the biblical Israel and the Queen of Sheba. Hence, the ruling house of Ethiopia was referred to as the Solomonic dynasty throughout history. This very ancient and powerful kingdom lasted well into the 20th century, and only effectively ended with the death of the revered emperor Haile Selassie in 1975. The Kingdom of Ethiopia, which lasted for thousands of years, remains an enigma to historians, as the kingdom seems somewhat cut off from the rest of the world during its long existence. Without much further ado, let us now focus on medieval African kingdoms. The medieval period in history generally refers to the period ranging from around 500 AD to 1500 AD. It was a time of great kings who left indelible marks in the sands of time. This was true not just in Europe, but in Africa as well. Several kingdoms rose and fell in medieval Africa, just like it happened in Europe and the rest of the world. In this part of the video, we will explore these medieval African kingdoms and empires, especially the most prominent ones, which include the Kingdom of Egypt, ancient Ghana, Mali, Songhai, Great Benin, in 3 medieval-era timeframes. Medieval African history, from 500 to 750 AD. Egypt has such a rich and well-documented history, which is still constantly evolving with new archaeological discoveries and studies. The weakening of the Roman Empire's rule over Egypt and most of northern Africa after the fall of Rome in 476 AD forced Rome to pull the bulk of its forces from those regions. The Arabic Muslim kingdoms to the east were more than eager and willing to fill this void. Hence, as early as 639 AD, Arabic forces started sweeping into northern Africa, and by 642 AD, their conquest of Egypt was successful. The Arab invasion of northern Africa and the subsequent spread of Islam throughout the region would prove beneficial, as it opened northern Africa to trade in gold, precious metals, spices, even slaves, and numerous other trade routes with the rich Arab kingdoms of the Levant. Moreover, Arab scholars, historians, architects, and scientists were largely welcomed into the newly Islamic kingdoms of medieval Africa by the Islamized kings. These scholars set up centers of learning. They also significantly contributed to the architectural, scientific, and political advancements of the newly medieval Islamic African kingdoms. Perhaps the most significant contribution of these scholars to African history is the very fact that most of what we know today about these medieval Islamic African kingdoms was from the well-documented and preserved historical records that they created as they traveled the length and breadth of northern Africa. Furthermore, during this era, the northern African Islamic caliphs opened up the hugely significant sub-Saharan trade route between the northern and mostly western regions of Africa. Crossing the harsh, unforgiving Sahara Desert that separated these two regions in large trade caravans that took months of traveling back and forth was made possible by the domestication of camels. Through this all-important sub-Saharan trade route, gold-rich nations in Western Africa then had access to direct exchange of gold and other trade goods with the north. The kingdoms of Egypt and Morocco remained the dominant power in Africa that controlled the sub-Saharan trade route during this period. Medieval Africa, from 751 to 1000. During this era, Islam continued to spread from the north down to the middle and western Africa parts of Africa. The first African medieval kingdom to rise to immense power and influence in Western Africa was the ancient Kingdom of Ghana. The Kingdom of Ghana was so powerful and wealthy in gold that an Arab scholar from Cordoba in southern Spain, named al-Bakri 1068, wrote an historical record praising the great power and wealth of the kingdom, and later, the empire of ancient Ghana. Although al-Bakri never visited ancient Ghana himself, his book was based on information he gathered from Arab merchants who traded across the sub-Saharan route from northern Africa to purchase gold and other items of trade from ancient Ghana. Thus, by 1070 AD, the ancient Kingdom of Ghana was the largest, wealthiest, and most powerful kingdom in West Africa. Its vastness and authority extended from the frontiers of Terkour to the western banks of the Niger, and from the Mandingo area in the south to beyond the Friends of the Sahara in the north. The ruling people of ancient Ghana were the Soninke. They established their capital in the city of Kumbi, the greatest trading center of western Sudan. The ruler of ancient Ghana, at the time that al-Bakri wrote his account, was called Tunkamenin. However, by 1100, the ancient Kingdom of Ghana was in serious decline. Historians list two important reasons for the decline of Ghana. First and foremost was the increasingly serious competition from the Songhai Berbers for control of the lucrative gold trade. Secondly, and more importantly, were the ceaseless attacks and pressures by some powerful enemies, notably the Almoravids and the Muslim state of Turkur, and later by the Susu and Mandigos. Hence, by 1120 AD, Ghana was a dying power, and in its place, the Kingdom of Mali rose to become the most dominant power in western Sudan. According to a generally held tradition, the Kingdom of Mali was founded by a local prince named Sundiata, who united the Mandigos into a very powerful kingdom. The greatest ruler of ancient Mali was unarguably Mansa Musa, the Magnificent, who ruled ancient Mali from 1312–1337. Musa was not given his cognomen for no reason, was truly considered as such. During his Grand Hajj to Mecca in 1324, his entourage alone numbered about 60,000 men. But that was not the most noteworthy fact about Musa's famous pilgrimage. It was recorded that he traveled to Mecca with an immeasurable amount of gold. The amount of gold that came prepared was so astonishingly large that the quantity of gold alone that he charitably distributed to the poor when stopped in Cairo, Egypt, caused a devaluation of the value of gold in the whole of Egypt by some 10 to 25%, which in turn severely affected the Egyptian economy for the following 12 years. Let that sink in for a moment. As expected, Musa's great pilgrimage brought great prestige and fame to Mali abroad, and even lured a lot of Arab merchants and scholars to the West African kingdom. Musa was also a great conqueror who conquered most of the neighboring tribes and brought them under the subjugation of Mali. He is also widely regarded by mostly Muslim scholars as the ruler who established Islam as the state religion of ancient Mali. One of the most detailed accounts of life in ancient Mali is that of Ibn Battuta, the renowned historian from Tangier. Even though Battuta visited Mali in 1532, when the kingdom had already passed the peak of its greatness, he was so impressed by the general good quality of life in ancient Mali, which rivaled anything he had seen in North Africa and on his extensive travels in Asia, that he wrote only glowing tributes about the kingdom, whereas the rise of ancient Mali was swift. Its decline was gradual, and not until the 17th century did completely lose its political identity. Medieval Africa from 1000 to 1550 AD. The African continent continued on its path of development without significant external intervention from the colonizing Europeans until the 15th century. Any exploration of ancient and medieval African kingdoms without the mention of the great Benin Empire is almost a scholarly sacrilege. Rising out of legends of the past, the Empire of Benin, which is a part of today's Midwestern Nigeria, achieved its greatest splendor and was at the very zenith of its power in the 15th and 16th centuries. According to local traditions, the first Oba king of ancient Benin was Ewika. Other worthy rulers of ancient Benin who deserve notable mentions are Iwedo the idolater, Ewuer the Great, who was unarguably the greatest king of ancient Benin, Ozolua, who ruled circa 1481–1504, was the king on the throne when a team of Portuguese diplomats led by Afonso d'Aveiro first came to visit in 1485. Ozolua warmly welcomed d'Aveiro, who established diplomatic and commercial relations between the two kingdoms. The Portuguese agent also introduced coconut to the city. He even traveled back to Lisbon with the chief of Ugoton, who acted as the Oba's ambassador. The chief later came back to Benin to set up a trading factory on behalf of the Portuguese. The great empire of Benin was a major force to reckon with for over 400 years. Until in 1897, during the reign of Oba Overemwem, when Benin finally fell to Great Britain after putting up a fierce resistance to the encroachments of the British. Another notable African empire that was very powerful during the 15th century was the Songhai. According to local legend, it was founded by the empire's legendary first king, named Sunni Ali. The Songhai Empire reached the very zenith of its power during the reign of the enigmatic Askia the Great, who ruled from circa 1500 to 1528. Ancient and medieval Africa's history is still being uncovered, but much of it is still unknown due to the African people's oral tradition of history-keeping. However, historians continue to discover amazing facts about the rich history of ancient and medieval Africa, with its many different cultures and kingdoms. These kingdoms were very powerful and influential, and the more historians discover about them, the more they must reconsider their previous view of Africa as a dark continent, without remarkable ancient and medieval history and powerful, influential, and wealthy kingdoms. Deepen your adventure by watching our playlists. And if you want more, just play the next episode that comes up as a suggestion on your left.